curious if you guys have any stories from when it did come out. What was the response that you got?
My parents had a I think, did the film premiere at Sundance or Toronto?
The film premiered at Sunday.
Was it Sundance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was actually one of the first. Actually, this is one of the few films I've had that actually it was bought by Fine Line right before Sundance, but it premiered there.
Right. I think people were genuinely. I mean, I want
shocked.
to just go back really quickly to say one thing, just because I know there's a lot of students here. And I've done 2 movies with Gregg, and I think for me the most interesting thing about working with him as a director is that he knows exactly what he wants. You know, you commented on the production design. There wasn't really a production designer, he's a production designer. There isn't really, I mean, he kind of, every drop of this movie is him.
That's absolutely true.
Every line, every costume, every nail polish color, every cut, this movie is Gregg.
And it wouldn't be these movies without Gregg's input like that, and that's what makes him, I think, so special and so unique and so signature. I mean, you watch it, and I mean, it's been a pleasure over the years to work with people, and they go, oh yeah, you know, that's kind of like Gregg Araki style.
Yeah.
It's become this own style.
It's really, and it's, as an actor, it's a great thing because you feel so safe when you walk into that world and you know that this person knows exactly the world. And I remember just one little thing that I thought was just funny. Do you remember the scene where Nathan's standing at the bus stop and there's the bus bench?
God help me.
God help me. And my first day on set, I hadn't shot anything yet, and I watched them framing that, and I watched Gregg watching at the monitor, and he was like, no, an inch. And that shot, just looking at that, and it was, I mean, he framed every single image was almost framed like a composition, like a painter would do it, and I just thought that was really, really interesting and cool, and I haven't really worked with many directors since then that work that way, and it's
She worked with Gus Van Sant.
And I've worked with Gus Van Sant. No, Gus is, yeah.
Gus is the same way.
Gus is just kind of like whatever, but I love that. I love, like, to me, like, watching this movie, like, my takeaway is, oh my god, that's so singular. You can love it, you can hate it, you can feel however you want to feel about it, but it's his and he signed it, and I love that.
Also, it really taught me that you don't need $1 million to make a movie, because look what he did with just paint. I mean, that's what I took away. It was like, oh my god, these beautiful visuals, and it's really just a few cans of paint and somebody really good to apply it. But you don't actually need tons of money. That's it, you know.
No, it's absolutely true. We've seen that with the advent of digital cameras and people, you know, having the technology, and you know, with that technology you can make films so much cheaper. So it's like sort of watching it come full circle and independent film come back, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember when Gregg was shooting on 16 millimeter with no money in '91, and you have to splice it on a moviola. You can't just dump it in a computer and start, you know, putting it together with Final Cut. So it was kind of interesting to see how things had come from that and come full circle. But also, it was you know, in all honesty, I think it was a lot more difficult to do things like that back then because you didn't have the support and you didn't have the technology available. So you weren't making a movie in 2 weeks and cutting it and having it together in a few months. It took a couple of years to do these things. You know, I remember when the Avid first came out, he bought the Avid.
We did Doom Generation.
Yeah, that's the first. He bought an Avid and threw it in his living room and just sat there learning the system. So it's really amazing to watch, really to be a part of that, you know, true independent spirit.
Well, tell us a little bit about the music, because it's such an important part. Does music inspire your writing? Do you write with certain pieces of music in mind?
Yeah, music has always been a huge inspiration to me. I mean, I always listen to music. For anybody who knows me, I listen to music the time I wake up, the time I go to bed, like in my car, like like, and I always have my iPod on, or in those days it was the Walkman. When I write, I always sit there and listen to music, and music has always been a really big inspiration to me. And also, the kind of bands I listen to have always been more of the sort of alternative, maybe not so commercial bands, and that's kind of very much kind of how my films have turned out, being very kind of not huge commercial like successes, but they have their alternative fans and they really understand them in the way that I think that music fans that become so passionate about a certain band, even if that band is somewhat obscure, like Slow Dive, which is in every one of my movies, their fans are extremely, you know, really into what the music they've done. And so music has always been a big part of movies. All of them have music. this movie in particular was almost like the zenith of that. I mean, I think it has like 50 cues. I mean, it has a ridiculous amount of songs, and to the point where a small movie, the budget of the movie is like $1 million, and a movie like this could never have a soundtrack like this today.
Did a great job.
Yeah, we had like so many music clearances, and
It's still unreleased. There's a lot of songs in that movie that have still never been released to this day. That Try and Reach You by Mojave 3, that's only in this movie.
oh no, it's great to hear it.
No pun intended.
Do you guys remember kind of the first thoughts that popped into your head when you actually read this script? Knowing.
Yeah! I was just, yeah!
I remember because it came in this package that had like decoupage, like different, it was so bright, it was so stylized and amazing.
The script itself was stylized. Actually, I saw one on, no, that was Ginger and Skull. I saw actually one on eBay that the garage, I used to Xerox with covers specially in the days when you had real scripts and you actually gave people scripts and there was paper. I used to Xerox the covers, and the cover of Nowhere I think is two kind of kids kissing or something. And it was just like this cool cover, so automatically you get the script and has this kind of cool graphic on it, and then it's all so the script really spoke to the people who got it, and of course a lot of people didn't get it. This was
You know what it actually gave me? I wonder, I definitely still have it. I wonder if you're not going to kill me for saying this. I should definitely give a copy to everybody up here. Nowhere was also intended at some point that this Nowhere is the creation. It was going to be an episodic, and he did write a sequel to it. Television. Yes, and so he basically ends up in the beginning coming to he knocks on the door and Montgomery didn't blow up, at least as far as I remember. And Bart's dead, and he's really upset about it. And then we run into Cliff, Montgomery's alter ego. He has black hair, flips the other color. And Kathleen's her character Lucifer is trying to kill me. She just throws this rock in the window and says, "You're dead." Y-E-R-D-E-D. And this is just, I haven't read this in so many years, but it absolutely exists.
Nowhere was actually originally written. It's very in the sort of post Twin Peaks era, and written as the pilot of a TV show like Twin Peaks. And I actually had several meetings. I think at like ABC or something as it being a TV show, which would have been fucking amazing. But, ABC, they somehow didn't buy it. I don't know why.
It was. I tell you, I read it and I still remember it vividly because I'm retelling you something I haven't read probably in over 10 years. So it's definitely got the Gregg Araki signature mark.
Are you at all interested in going into serialized television now that there are networks?
No, yeah, I've had a few things where I did an MTV pilot a few like 5-10 years ago. I mean, I've always been interested in TV. I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day about TV though. The one thing about TV that scares me is I know everybody who works TV, it's so much work. Like you literally work like 18 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Wait, but I shot my scene in front of the dotted wall. I remember working like, I think it was 16, 17, 18 hours of being shoved up in front of those dots, like, don't move off the dots, Rachel.
The day that Nathan exploded and Jim was covered in blood, it was like literally a 22-hour day.
22-hour day.
Like it was like literally how many days?
It's like, do we want to come back for 4 hours, or are we just going to stick it out and finish this?
Yeah, like I remember Arturo, the DP, fell asleep on the dolly as I wake up. But that's the thing about it. It's like at least when you're doing a movie, it's 4 weeks of insanity, and then you can take a break. But when you do TV, Kevin's on the show right now. It's like you're doing the 16-hour days, like month after month after month after month.
Don't you think the pile of money helps soften the blow?
Maybe. It's a huge pile of money, maybe. But I do love the idea of TV. I mean, that's why it would have been awesome to do Nowhere as a TV series and have these characters all go on and live these crazy lives and all this development stuff. It's because it's another way to tell a story, and I do think it's very interesting the way TV is such a different medium. Like TV shows sort of become almost like your friends, and they're like a part of your life because you see them every week, week after week after week. And the relationship with TV and film is a totally different thing. I mean, something I'd be really interested in.
Don't you feel a little bit like TV has almost become, and now that there's all these new networks, sort of the indie film of today? Because I don't see, like back when we did this movie, there was indie film after indie film after indie film, and that doesn't exist
But I
anymore.
still have never seen Nowhere on TV,
No,
even cable
I have
TV. Right? I mean, it's just.
It has to, because I just got a residual for it a couple months ago for free TV.
Okay.
And I'm like, what channel showed this? What
I
channel
mean,
was
like,
that?
you know, Sundance Channel or whatever.
Sundance? That's what, okay.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, Greg, considering all of the changes that have happened, both the editing system, the cameras, things like that, has that changed any way that you approach making movies?
I love it, and it's so easy, and it's so, the tools are so amazing. As I said, I just did a movie, my last movie called Boom, and my first movie shot on Red camera, I've edited all my movies digitally from Kid Generation on, but it's the first movie that has lived totally digitally in post, like never gone to film, except at the end they did a 35 blow up of it. But I loved it. Like there was so much stuff you can do, color-wise, image-wise, which is what Kathleen was talking about. You can reframe every shot if you want. You have so much control over the image. As the control freak that I am as a director, I found it amazing.
And I was always amazed when I met you, and he lived still single, and he had the moviola right under his bed, and then you couldn't go in the closet because that's where all the film strips were hanging. So you can't go in the closet.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah, no, when cutting on film was so difficult, and that's why digital editing is amazing, and I think digital cinematography, as much as we all love cinema, and that's why it's so awesome to see this on 35, like real film. But it's just that I do feel like the digital medium is so it has so much potential.
All right, so who here saw the film tonight for the first time?
Wow.
Wow. Excellent. All right, so let's take questions from you guys. Who wants to kick this off? Yes.
Yeah, well, I've never really, to this day, I've never directed a studio movie. I have developed projects. I've developed projects for, more sort of mainstream companies, like, as I did an MTV pilot, and I've written a Showtime pilot, and done various kinds of things. But I've never really, for people who are looking to break into the mainstream, I need that same advice. I don't know. I've just kind of always done my thing, but it's something I started at actually here it's just so funny to be back here because I was always like the weird artsy punk rock. I had a funny haircut and I was like very like anti-mainstream, anti-Hollywood. I was really into John Goddard when I first came here, and my teachers all hated me and they were all about me. And so that's again, talking about music, music was such a big influence on me at that time, like in the 80s when I was here, the sort of post-punk alternative music was really the thing, or it was definitely my thing, and the attitude of that was very much do your own thing and sort of be or true to your artistic muse, and fuck it if it's commercial, who cares? And that's always been sort of the attitude in my movies, which is why I'm sitting here and not in Spagos. I've always just sort of done my movies and hope for the best. So that's my advice. Did you get money for this movie? Well, the money for this movie came from a French company. My film's actually interesting. Of course, in France, they have a much more respect for auteurs and that. And the movie, as I said, it was not much. It was like about $1 million, which is a little more than we made Doom Generation for. Same company did Doom Generation. I did a film a few years prior to The Living End that we made for literally 20 grand, maybe 30 grand, a 16 millimeter, no crew. Like a crew of like 2 people. I shot it myself. It was a nightmare. But it got distributed. But it got Sundance, got picked up. It got a certain amount of attention, and sort of established me in sort of an independent world, and then we were able. It was funny. One of the producers I was working with, Jim Stark, is one of the producers of Stranger in Paradise. He always used to tell me, like, you make these like, what did he say? You make these homo movies that piss off the queers or whatever. You need to make me a heterosexual movie, and then I can, because of these punk rock movies that gay people are offended by, so which is what The Living End is basically. And so, and Totally Fucked Up is sort of the same thing, and that's the film I made right after that. And then so I said, okay, well, I'll make you a heterosexual movie. So the Doom Generation is actually called A Heterosexual Movie by Gregg Araki, but the whole idea behind it was that for anybody who's seen that movie, it's very punk rock, and very subversive, and very subliminally super queer, and then like the relationship Jimmy has with the other characters is very ambiguous, and there's this very weird bisexual thing going on between all of them. And so the idea is that it was the queerest straight film that could be made, and that was sort of the way it was sold, and they managed to get $1 million out of France, or $750 out of France, and that was my first 35 millimeter movie. And then after that, we did No More Than Women.
For all the actors up there, like, were you familiar with Gregg's work before working with him, and what kind of maybe drew you to the script and to do the movie? Some of you
Jordan still has the VHS of The Living End, right?
It's true. I do. I was employed by Gregg. I dropped out of college and I became an actress, and 4 months later, I got cast in a movie called The Doom Generation. And at the 11th hour, I think it was Christmas, we'd rehearsed, gotten haircuts. I was forbidden from doing Gregg's movie by my mother.
This is an old story. I was just saying that you had you had to see The Living End to like.
Right. So anyway, I'm
We
sorry,
saw
I
shot
went
something
on.
with Greg before.
Oh yeah, we did a short, which
That's
we've
still on the
never
show.
seen. I
Yeah,
don't think
no.
Gregg's seen it, but
It's
I met
unfinished.
Gregg and that way, and I got to see The Living End, and I still own it for $129.
Yeah, she never returned it to the video store, and it ended up costing her like hundreds of dollars.
I was just happy to get a script where I went in and read and someone didn't go, be sassy. Sass it up. Because that's my cue to go, oh, you mean black out? And like I didn't have to do that for Gregg. I could just go in and read the lines.
That was one of the things about Living End, or Nowhere, is I really wanted it to be this kind of Benetton and there's that whole thing about race in that movie that it's been in a lot of movies actually, where the race and sexuality are kind of not an issue in the world that the movies are put.
It was interesting when I met Greg. I met him, in a cafe, and he said, I do these no-budget movies, and it's not a typical kind of Hollywood movie, but sort of in the spirit of John Hughes, like punk rock John Hughes. He's like, but I'm actually having a screening of some of my films, so you should come check them out. And so I actually, before I started working with him, it was like really like a crash course in what indie film was. Is just The Long Weekend of Despair. I had to go see The Long Weekend, yeah. And then I watched Three Bewildered People in the Night on VHS. And that kind of solidified it for me. I didn't know a lot. I didn't have a lot of film history behind me, but I knew that what I saw was something special and something I felt connected to. And in that sense, it became very, very important to me.
Speaking of your shorts, Gregg, our archivist has unearthed your 310.
Wow! This is Lassez!
I don't have it here, but
too bad.
But do we have your blessing if we wanted to?
No, it's funny. It is interesting because I think the archivist said it's kind of like Splendor. It's interesting. I was talking to some students earlier in the little talk, and it's interesting to me that you look at it and there is stuff in there that's in all my movies. It's three characters, very much like Three Wheeler People or Splendor, or all my movies have always had this sort of triangle at the center of it. And I remember it was the movie that was kind of kicked out of USC because the teacher's like, no voiceover, and it was like all voiceover. It was kind of this Godardian take on like this sort of angst-ridden filmmaker and his two best friends who were girls. And I haven't seen it for years, but it's funny to me that those things, that even your early student films, they have a lot of your motifs and themes in them.
Other questions?
Somebody else, the actor, something.
I'm a really big fan. I bought the Splendor soundtrack for you and Kathleen as much as you want. Can you tell us anything about Whitebird?
Yeah. I mean, this is like, I'm working on a film called Whitebird right now. based on a book by Laura Kashiki, I think. It's just the one thing about movies that haven't happened yet is I usually don't talk about them because I never know if they're really gonna happen. It's always just bullshit. Like everybody's like, oh, I'm working on this, working on that. But it is a project that we're sort of actively trying to get off the ground right now, and it's got Shailene Woodley from Descendants is sort of the lead of it, and it's a cool project. If for people who've seen other of my movies, it's probably the most like Mysterious Skin compared to him. It's not really like Nowhere. It's more like it's a little like a serious drama, very kind of dreamy. It's cool.